dream destinations, exceptional cruises, polar adventures. Welcome to Beyond the Horizon, the podcast that takes you where the journey truly begins, a production of Area Voyages.
So, picture this. Every single day, about 30,000 people will just, walk right up to the Colosseum.
Yeah, it's a staggering number.
Right. And every single day, thousands of those exact people will be turned away at the gate. I mean, their entire vacation, a trip they probably spent, thousands of dollars on, just completely ruined by a single, entirely unforced error.
Oh, absolutely. It is, it's honestly the ultimate travel tragedy. We see it constantly.
Yeah, so today, we're going to make sure you are never, ever one of those people.
Because, people tend to treat a 2,000-year-old metropolis like it's just like a casual theme park. Like you can just stroll into it on a Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. And, usually when we talk about a major world capital, we kind of think of history as something contained. You know what I mean?
Right, like it's behind a velvet rope.
Yeah, it's polite. You go to a specific building, you buy your ticket, you look at the old thing behind the glass, and then boom, you step back out into the modern world.
It's very compartmentalized, clean. It's comfortable that way. I mean, we really like having clear boundaries between the present and the past. It kind of, reduces the cognitive load.
But then you step off a plane,
right.
You take a train into Royal Termini, and suddenly that compartmentalization is just completely shattered.
Oh, totally destroyed.
You are navigating a city where, like, a 2,000-year-old concrete dome sits right next to a living, breathing neighborhood.
Right, exactly.
You're walking past a cafe, someone's drinking espresso, a scooter flies by, and literally right behind them is a triumphal arch from the Roman Empire. Yeah. Rome doesn't just have history. It is quite literally built on top of it.
It is the absolute definition of a living, breathing, just totally layered metropolis. You aren't just looking at history, right? You were forced to interact with it, to walk on it, to eat your dinner in the shadow of it. And that sheer density of human civilization, just stacked layer upon layer, is awe-inspiring. But, and this is the crucial part, it can also be profoundly overwhelming.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Especially for anyone trying to actually navigate it without, a solid strategy.
Exactly.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are looking at this incredibly comprehensive travel dossier. It was put together by Yvon Jr. Blanchette of Area Voyages.
And it really is a masterclass in how to actually experience Rome like an insider.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate about this specific dossier is that it doesn't just, list places to go. It completely re-engineers how you approach the city.
Right.
The goal here is to help you bypass the crushing crowds, dodge the tourist traps, and actually feel the rhythm of the place.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Because there is a massive difference between just seeing Rome and actually experiencing Rome.
Definitely.
The dossier is engineered to shift you from, a passive spectator fighting for shoulder space to an active participant in the city's daily life.
So let's start with that unforced error at the Colosseum I mentioned earlier. If we are going to navigate Rome, we have to start with the monumental sites, the heavy hitters.
Foundations, yeah. Right, the guide refers to this as the mandatory foundation of the city. We can call it the Holy Trinity of Roman monuments, plus one absolute mandatory addition.
So the Colosseum complex, the Vatican museums with the Sistine Chapel, and the Pantheon, those are the three obligatory beats.
The big three.
Exactly. You really cannot claim to have understood Rome without engaging with those three spaces.
Okay, but I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least, play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I always think about travel like this. Imagine showing up to a major international airport with your luggage, walking up to the gate and just saying, "Hey, I'd like to get on this flight to Tokyo. Can I just buy a ticket right now?"
Oh, man. They would look at you like you had completely lost your mind.
Right. But for some reason, people do exactly this with the Colosseum. They think, it's a big outdoor ruin. Surely I could just walk up to a ticket booth. Why is there this disconnect?
It's weird, isn't it?
It really is. Why do travelers expect spontaneity in a city of 4 million people that sees, roughly 35 million tourists a year?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it basically comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of scale and preservation.
How so?
We often view modern ticketing systems and timed entry apps as these annoying bureaucratic hurdles. But they are actually the only mechanisms keeping these ancient marvels accessible without physically destroying them.
Oh, wow. I never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, I mean, think about the Pantheon. For years, you could just walk right in. Now, it requires a strict timed entry ticket.
Right.
Because if the authorities allowed everyone into the Pantheon who wanted to walk in on a random Tuesday in July, the sheer volume of human bodies, the humidity generated by human breath, the physical friction on the ancient marble floors, it would cause irreversible structural damage.
So the booking system isn't just about crowd control. It's like literal preservation.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this applies to the Colosseum complex, too, which, by the way, actually includes the Roman Forum and the Palatine Hill on a single combined ticket.
Right. It's a package deal.
Yeah. And if you don't book this week's in advance, you are simply locked out, period.
So let's actually talk about the Roman Forum for a second.
Yeah.
Because the dossier gives a very strong recommendation here that I think completely changes the experience.
Oh, the guide recommendation, absolutely.
Yeah, the advice is to never, ever do the Forum without a specialized guide. And I'll admit, the first time I went to Rome, I just walked into the Forum by myself, and I was completely lost.
It is notoriously difficult for the modern brain to process.
It really is. I like to think of it like looking at the motherboard of a computer without knowing what any of the chips actually do.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right. You look down, you see a bunch of intricate structures, incredible power once ran through this system, but you just can't see the logic. You're basically just looking at scattered piles of rocks and broken columns.
Yeah, because the Colosseum makes intuitive sense to us. We still build stadiums today. We intuitively grasp the function of the seating, the arena, the entry gates.
We know what a sports arena looks like.
Exactly. But the Roman Forum was the political, commercial, and judicial heart of an entire empire. It was this dense, chaotic urban center that was repeatedly built over, burned down, and rebuilt over 1,000 years.
So how does a guide actually change that motherboard from a confusing mess into, like, a functioning system?
Well, a skilled guide provides the missing software. They rebuild the structures in your mind.
Oh, I like that.
Without context, you might walk right past a nondescript mound of dirt and stones, but with a guide, you realize you are standing exactly where the body of Julius Caesar was cremated in 44 BC.
Wait, really? Just a mound of dirt?
Basically, yeah. And that event functionally ended the Roman Republic and birthed the empire. Or, you understand that the raised platform over there is the rostra where Mark Antony delivered his famous funeral oration.
Wow. Suddenly that chaotic field snaps into sharp historical focus.
It changes everything.
That context is just everything. And speaking of structures that completely blow your mind when you understand the context, we need to dive into the Pantheon.
Oh, the Pantheon, yes.
Because, okay, you secure this timed entry ticket, you walk inside, and you're looking at a building from 125 AD.
Commissioned by the Emperor Hadrian. It is arguably the best preserved ancient building in the world.
What fascinates me is the engineering of the dome. I mean, this is a concrete dome with an open oculus, like a massive hole right in the center open to the sky.
Right.
And it still functions perfectly today. 2,000 years, and it has literally never needed structural restoration. How is that physically possible? I mean, modern concrete bridges seem to crumble after, 50 years?
Yeah, this is where Roman engineering borders on straight-up alchemy.
Alchemy.
Pretty much. Modern Portland cement, which is what we use today, is designed to cure quickly, but it degrades over time, especially when it's exposed to water or environmental stress.
Okay.
But Roman concrete, specifically what they used for the Pantheon, was this unique mixture of volcanic ash called pozzolana, lime, and water.
Volcanic ash from the area around Mount Vesuvius, right?
Yes, specifically from Pozzuoli, near Naples. And when you mix that specific volcanic ash with lime and water, it triggers a chemical reaction that creates a remarkably stable compound.
That's incredible.
But here is the real secret to its longevity. Roman concrete is essentially self-healing.
Wait, self-healing? Like, literally?
Literally. When microcracks form in the concrete over the centuries, moisture naturally seeps in, and that moisture reacts with unreacted lime clasts still embedded in the mixture.
Okay, I'm following.
This creates new calcium silicate hydrate crystals that literally grow and fill the cracks.
So every time it rains through that oculus, the building is practically healing itself.
In a microscopic sense, yes. It's brilliant. And furthermore, the dome is an engineering marvel of weight distribution. The Romans used incredibly heavy aggregate like travertine at the very base of the dome.
Right, to anchor it.
Exactly. And as they built upward toward the oculus, they used progressively lighter materials. They eventually even mixed in lightweight pumice stone near the top.
That makes so much sense.
And the oculus itself acts as a massive compression ring, distributing the stress evenly down the walls.
It's staggering to think about that level of architectural mastery happening, nearly 2 millennia ago.
It really is.
And the dossier actually recommends booking your Pantheon ticket for right at opening time, just to watch the morning light fall through that oculus and track across the marble floor before the crowds completely fill the space.
Which brings us to the third pillar of this mandatory trinity, the Vatican Museums and the Sistine Chapel.
Right.
The dossier is incredibly explicit here. Without a time ticket, the queues for the Vatican can literally be measured in hours.
I've seen those lines. They are insane. They wrapped entirely around the massive perimeter walls of the Vatican State.
Oh, easily.
You have people standing on the pavement in the brutal Roman sun for 3 hours before they even see a single piece of art.
It's a completely unforced error, and honestly, it introduces a massive psychological barrier before you even begin your cultural experience.
Yeah, museum fatigue.
Exactly. Cognitive depletion. The Vatican collection is staggering. It completely rivals the Louvre in scale and density.
Oh, for sure.
If you exhaust your physical and mental reserves just fighting to get through the front door, you will have absolutely nothing left to process the actual art.
Because the Vatican isn't just a museum you pop into. The dossier really puts the scale into perspective. It reminds us that the Vatican is its own sovereign state.
Yes, an independent country, entirely enclaved within Rome.
Complete with its own postal system, its own radio station, and its own military.
Right, the Pontifical Swiss Guard, which has been protecting the Pope since 1506.
The postal system detail is always wild to me.
Mm-hmm.
You can legally mail a postcard from a different country while physically standing in the middle of a Roman neighborhood.
It's a fun quirk, and, when you bypass that line with your advance ticket and actually get inside, everyone naturally just rushes toward the Sistine Chapel.
Right, everyone wants to see Michelangelo's ceiling.
Exactly. And while the dossier confirms it absolutely delivers on the hype, it also highlights that the journey to the chapel is just as important.
Yeah, because you have to walk through this absolute labyrinth of history to get there.
You do. You walk through the Gallery of Maps, which is this mesmerizing corridor featuring topographical maps of Italy painted in 1580.
The detail on those is insane.
It shows an understanding of geography that is stunning for the era. And then you pass through the Raphael rooms, the private apartments of Pope Julius II.
Oh, I love those rooms.
They were frescoed by Raphael at the exact same time Michelangelo was painting the Sistine ceiling just down the hall.
It's like a Renaissance heavyweight bout happening in real time.
It totally is. But if your legs are already numb from standing outside for 3 hours, you will breeze right past Raphael's School of Athens without even a second glance.
That makes total sense. So the advance ticket isn't just about saving time, it's really about preserving your capacity for wonder.
Beautifully said.
So, okay, that covers the Holy Trinity. But earlier I mentioned the +1, the mandatory addition to the itinerary.
Yes.
The dossier stresses that the Borghese Gallery is practically required viewing.
It is, housed in the Villa Borghese Pinciana, surrounded by one of Rome's most magnificent public parks.
Sounds gorgeous.
It is. It houses what is arguably the greatest, most concentrated collection of Baroque sculpture in the world.
We're talking about Gian Lorenzo Bernini, right?
We absolutely are. If Michelangelo mastered the sheer muscular power of marble, Bernini mastered its fragility and movement.
I am thinking specifically of his piece, Apollo and Daphne.
Yes. It is the defining masterpiece of the gallery. It depicts the exact mythological moment where the nymph Daphne is transforming into a laurel tree to escape the god Apollo.
It's breathtaking in person.
When you look at the marble, you can literally see her fingers sprouting into translucent leaves. You can see the bark enveloping her legs.
How do you even do that with stone?
Right. To carve marble, which is a dense, unforgiving stone so thin that light actually passes through the leaves, it's a technical achievement that honestly defies logic.
But the catch with the Borghese Gallery, it sells out weeks in advance.
Weeks. Sometimes months during peak season.
Because the museum is relatively small, right?
Mm.
And they strictly limit entry to 2-hour time slots.
And this is a hard truth that many travelers simply refuse to accept. If you arrive at the Villa Borghese without a booking, you are not getting in.
No exceptions.
Period. There is no negotiation. You will just miss out on one of the defining artistic experiences of Western civilization.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. You've played the logistics game, you booked the Colosseum, the Vatican, the Pantheon, and the Borghese months ago.
You're doing great.
You successfully navigated the monumental heart of the city, what the Romans call the Centro Storico. You've absorbed all this ancient and Renaissance history. Naturally, you are starving.
Oh, that sheer volume of daytime walking basically guarantees it.
And this is exactly where the second major trap is sprung. Because what does a tired, hungry traveler do?
They sit down at the first place they see.
Right. They walk out of the Pantheon or the Colosseum, they look across the piazza, they see a restaurant with a patio, and they just sit down.
That is human nature.
But the dossier drops an absolute golden rule for this exact moment. If you want the most authentic Roman food, you have to leave the historic center immediately.
The geography of authenticity in Rome is very, very specific.
Break that down for us.
So the Centro Storico, which is the triangle formed by the Pantheon, Piazza Navona, and Campo de' Fiori, contains some of the finest public spaces in the world.
Absolutely stunning.
But precisely because it is the beating heart of tourist Rome, the culinary ecosystem has adapted to tourists.
Meaning they cater to a global palate, not a Roman one.
Exactly. And they rely heavily on foot traffic, not repeat local customers.
All right.
If a restaurant knows you are a tourist who will eat there exactly once in your life and never ever return, the economic incentive to produce a truly exceptional, labor-intensive meal drops significantly.
And the dossier has a massive flashing red light warning about this. If you are walking around Rome and you see a restaurant that has a menu sitting outside the entrance with photos of the food on it,
walk away quickly.
It seems like such a simple heuristic, but it's honestly brilliant. If a restaurant has to rely on laminated pictures of spaghetti to get you in the door, they aren't cooking authentic Roman food.
No, they are not.
So where do we go? The dossier points us south of the ancient center to a neighborhood called Testaccio.
If you really want to understand the cuisine that actually defines Rome, you have to understand Testaccio.
Okay.
And to understand Testaccio, you have to look at its socio-economic history.
Let's paint a picture of this neighborhood. Because it's not grand piazzas and marble fountains, right?
Not at all.
The dossier describes it as an old working-class district that was quite literally built around Rome's former slaughterhouses.
The Mattatodio. It was constructed in the late 19th century, and it became the industrial epicenter of Roman butchery.
Okay.
And that single historical reality is the entire key to unlocking authentic Roman food.
Because Roman cuisine isn't rooted in wealthy aristocratic dining. It's rooted in extreme necessity.
It is the ultimate cuisine of the working class.
Right.
The workers at the slaughterhouses, the scortachini or skinners, were often paid part of their wages in kind, like with meat.
But they weren't given the prime cuts, were they?
Oh, absolutely not. The steaks, the roasts, those went to the wealthy families, the clergy, the upper class across the river. The workers were given what the Romans called the quintum quarto.
The fifth quarter.
Exactly. It's this mathematical impossibility that beautifully describes the offal, the tripe, the intestines, the heart, the lungs, the tail.
Basically the parts of the animal that weighed roughly a quarter of the total carcass, but had very little commercial value.
Exactly. And from those discarded, incredibly tough, cheap cuts of meat, the working class of Testaccio created actual culinary masterpieces.
Because if you have a tough, gelatinous piece of meat like an oxtail, you can't just, sear it in a pan. You have to innovate.
You really do. You have to braise it. You have to slow cook it for hours until the collagen breaks down and melts into the sauce.
Wow.
This is the birthplace of coda alla vaccinara, the legendary Roman oxtail stew.
I've heard of that.
The butchers, the vaccinari, would take the tail, simmer it for 4 or 5 hours with massive amounts of celery, carrots, onions, tomatoes, and pancetta.
I read once that traditional recipes even add a touch of dark chocolate or cacao, pine nuts, and raisins to the sauce to give it this deep, complex, almost sweet and sour profile.
That's the classic preparation. It transforms a total throwaway cut of meat into one of the richest, most complex dishes on the planet.
That sounds incredible.
It is. And Testaccio is also the spiritual home of the great Roman pasta dishes, which are similarly born from working class necessity.
Right, the holy trinity of Roman pasta. Cacio e pepe, alla gricia, and carbonara.
Yes. Take cacio e pepe. Cheese and pepper. It sounds incredibly simple, but the chemistry required to execute it properly is incredibly precise.
It's rooted in the history of shepherds, right?
Yes, shepherds out in the Roman countryside needed sustenance that wouldn't spoil. Dried pasta, aged pecorino romano cheese, and black peppercorns. That's it.
But if you just dump cheese on hot pasta, you just get a clumpy, stringy mess.
Exactly. The absolute genius of the dish is utilizing the starchy pasta water.
Right. The starch acts as an emulsifier.
You got it. You vigorously beat the finely grated aged sheep's milk cheese with a ladle of the boiling starchy water.
And that melts it.
Well, the starch prevents the proteins in the cheese from coagulating, creating a perfectly smooth, rich cream sauce without a single drop of actual cream or butter.
And the black pepper wasn't just for flavor. Historically, it helps stimulate body heat for shepherds out in the cold.
Exactly. And if you take that base of cacio e pepe and you add guanciale, which is cured pork jowl, rendering out that deeply savory, unctuous fat, you have rigatoni alla grizia.
Okay, so the dossier tells us to eat these specific dishes, but it also directs us to a very specific location in Testaccia to experience this. A restaurant called Flavio al Belvedetto.
Yes.
And the physical location in this restaurant completely blows my mind.
It is built directly into the side of Monte Testaccio.
Now, Monte Testaccio translates to Mount Testaccio. It sounds like a natural geological formation, but it isn't geology at all.
No, it is entirely man-made.
It is an artificial hill, roughly 115 feet high, and covering an area of over 200,000 square feet, made entirely out of ancient discarded Roman trash.
Specifically, broken amphorae.
Let's dig into the logistics of this because it perfectly illustrates the sheer scale of the Roman Empire.
It really does.
During the imperial era, Rome had a population of roughly 1 million people. Feeding them required a massive, state-subsidized logistical network called the Annona, and one of the primary imports was olive oil.
Massive quantities of olive oil imported primarily from the Roman province of Baetica, which is modern-day Andalusia in Spain.
They transported this oil in these massive clay jars called Dressel 20 amphorae. But here's the catch.
Uh-oh.
Once the oil was emptied at the river port in Rome, these specific Spanish amphorae couldn't be reused or recycled.
Right, because the clay absorbed the oil, and if you tried to put anything else in them or even refill them with new oil, it would go rancid and spoil the whole batch.
So they had a massive logistical nightmare on their hands. Millions of massive clay pots that had to be disposed of safely without creating a public health hazard or clogging the Tiber River.
Their solution was highly organized, state-sponsored dumping.
Just a giant landfill.
But not just throwing them in a pile, they systematically shattered them and carefully stacked the curved shards layer upon layer, terrace upon terrace over the course of centuries.
Wow.
And to keep the rancid oil residue from smelling, they poured quicklime over every single layer.
Which essentially cemented the shards together, creating a structurally sound artificial mountain.
Exactly.
And today, in the 21st century, Flavio al Belvedetto is built right into the side of this mountain.
It's amazing.
The walls of the wine cellar are just the exposed layers of 2,000-year-old broken pottery. You are sitting there, eating an oxtail stew birthed by 19th century slaughterhouse workers inside a structure made of 2nd century Roman recycling.
It is the perfect encapsulation of the city. Food and history inextricably bound together.
Really is.
And, the dossier also highlights another neighborhood just across the river, a Trastevere, which literally means across the Tiber. It specifically mentions an institution there called De Enzo al 29.
Trastevere has a slightly different vibe than Testaccio. It's known for its narrow, winding cobblestone streets and ivy-covered buildings.
Beautiful area. And De Enzo is legendary for executing those classic Roman dishes flawlessly. The dossier specifically points out their artichokes.
The carciofi alla Judia, the Jewish-style fried artichokes.
Which introduces another massive layer of Roman history. Rome is home to the oldest continuous Jewish community in Europe, dating back to the 2nd century BC.
I didn't realize it went back that far.
It does. And during the Renaissance, the community was confined to a walled ghetto near the river, living under extreme restrictions and poverty.
So much like the slaughterhouse workers. They had to create brilliant food out of cheap, discarded ingredients.
Exactly. And the Roman globe artichoke, the Romanesco, is unique. It doesn't have the tough inner choke that you find in standard artichokes.
Which allows for this specific preparation. They trim the tough outer leaves and then double fry the entire artichoke in deep olive oil.
Yes. The first fry cooks it through, making the heart incredibly tender. Then they open the leaves up like a flower and submerge it again in incredibly hot oil.
So the outside leaves become shatteringly crisp, almost like potato chips, while the inside remains creamy. It's a textural masterpiece born out of historical marginalization.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this is why the dossier's advice to leave the historic center for food is just so vital.
It makes perfect sense now.
When you curate your travel this way, when you skip the laminated photo menu near the Pantheon and seek out a former slaughterhouse district to eat oxtail, or cross the river for Jewish-style artichokes, you aren't just consuming calories.
Right.
You are actively consuming the socioeconomic history of the Roman working class. You are participating in a multi-century story of survival, ingenuity, and profound culinary respect.
I think that's the defining line between a tourist and a traveler. A tourist eats near the monument, a traveler eats in the history.
Well said.
Okay, so we have locked down our tickets, we survived the daytime crowds at the monuments, and we ventured into Testaccio for a heavy, life-changing meal of pasta and oxtail. Naturally, we are completely full.
You'd have to be.
We need a walk to digest all of that.
Which brings us to the next massive paradigm shift in the dossier, the temporal shift.
Yes, the realization that Rome during the day and Rome at night are functionally two completely different cities.
The dossier actually pitches a guided nighttime walk through the historic center as one of the absolute best experiences available in the city. It's magical.
It specifically highlights revisiting the very same monuments we talked about earlier, the Trevi Fountain, the Pantheon, and Campo de' Fiori.
Oh wait, I know what you're going to ask.
I am. Because I have to push back here. Isn't Rome famous for its vibrant street life, its chaotic, beautiful energy? Why are we telling the listener to wait until the crowds completely disappear?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know.
Yeah, I mean, if you remove the people, don't you remove the Roman experience?
That is a completely fair challenge. Yes, the energy of the daytime crowds is part of the modern reality of Rome, but we have to really analyze the psychology of a tourist in a crowd versus a traveler in solitude.
Okay, break that down for me.
So during the day, particularly in the summer, places like the Trevi Fountain are a chaotic scrum.
Absolute madness.
It is a mass of humanity. Elbows, selfie sticks, tour groups following little flags. When you are in that environment, your brain basically enters survival mode.
Oh, totally.
You are constantly assessing your personal space, worrying about pickpockets, trying to politely nudge your way to the front just to get a clear line of sight to the water.
You are in a highly transactional space. You are trying to acquire the view and leave.
Precisely. You are very aware of yourself as a tourist, competing for resources. But at night, a physiological and psychological shift occurs.
Interesting.
When the visual and auditory noise of 30,000 other people is stripped away, your brain actually has the bandwidth to process the sheer scale and artistry of the architecture.
Let's apply that to the Trevi Fountain specifically, because the history of that fountain is fascinating. It's not just a beautiful sculpture. It's the terminus of a functioning ancient Roman aqueduct.
The Aqua Virgo, constructed by Marcus Agrippa in 19 BC.
Wow.
It has been bringing pure water into the center of Rome from springs over a dozen miles away for 2 millennia.
And the current Baroque fountain, designed by Nicola Salvi in the 18th century, was built directly into the side of a palace.
The Palazzo Poli. And when you stand there at, say, 11:30 p.m., when the crowds have thinned out to just a handful of couples, the artificial lighting illuminates the travertine stone against the dark sky.
It must look incredible.
The statues of Oceanus taming the waters look extraordinarily theatrical. But more importantly, because the crowd noise is gone, you can actually hear the water. You hear the roar of the Aqua Virgo pouring into the basin exactly as it was designed to be heard centuries ago.
It shifts from a stressful photo op to an emotional experience. It's kind of like listening to a complex piece of classical music in a crowded subway station versus listening to it alone in an acoustically perfect room. You can finally hear the underlying notes.
Exactly. And that same principle applies to the Pantheon. To stand in the Piazza della Rotonda at night after the surrounding cafes have packed away their outdoor seating.
Just taking it all in.
The massive granite columns of the portico are illuminated against the night sky. The sheer monolithic weight of the building becomes much more imposing when it's not surrounded by tour groups eating gelato.
The dossier also mentions Campo de' Fiori, which goes through perhaps the most dramatic daily transformation of any square in Rome.
Campo de' Fiori, Field of Flowers. In the morning, it is one of Rome's oldest and loudest open-air produce markets. Tints, vendors yelling, vibrant colors.
Very lively.
But after the stalls are broken down and the sun sets, it takes on an entirely different, almost brooding character.
Which is actually fitting given its history. Because right in the center of Campo de' Fiori, dominating the square, is this dark, hooded statue of the philosopher Giordano Bruno.
Looking defiantly toward the Vatican.
Right.
He was burned at the stake in that exact spot by the Roman Inquisition in 1600 for heresy, including his cosmological theories that stars were distant suns surrounded by their own planets.
During the day, the market stalls completely swallow the base of his statue. You barely even notice him.
Yeah, he just blends in.
But at night, when the square empties out and the bars around the perimeter light up, his silhouette just dominates the space. It's a very stark reminder of the brutal layers of Roman history that exist right alongside the beautiful ones.
This is exactly why the temporal shift is so vital. Anyone can walk by a monument at noon. But curating your day so that you interact with these spaces when they are quietest and most emotionally resonant, that is the strategic advantage Yvonne Jr. Blanchette is trying to impart.
Okay, so we've solved how to book the sites. We've solved where to eat the real food. We've solved what time of day to walk the historic center. Now we have to zoom way out.
Let's do it.
We need to look at the most critical macro decision of the entire trip, a decision that essentially dictates the reality of everything we've just discussed.
Seasonality, or basically how to hack the Roman calendar.
The dossier sets up what we can simply call the danger zone, and that is July and August. The advice is essentially avoid at all costs.
Absolutely. Summer in Rome is physically punishing. The dossier notes that temperatures regularly and increasingly exceed 35 degrees Celsius.
That's over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And we aren't just talking about a dry heat. We were talking about the urban heat island effect.
Exactly. Think about the geography we've been discussing. Rome is a city of stone, asphalt, travertine, and concrete.
Right.
During a July heat wave, the physical infrastructure of the city absorbs the solar radiation all day long, and then it continues to radiate that heat back out throughout the entire night.
So it never really cools off.
No, the temperature rarely drops enough to provide any real relief.
Add to that the sheer volume of humanity.
Which brings its own ambient heat and humidity. The lines are interminable, the air is stagnant in the narrow medieval streets.
This sounds miserable.
The dossier explicitly warns that if you must go in the summer, you have to adopt a survival strategy. Book everything well in advance, start every single day before 9 a.m., and retreat to air conditioning or a shaded park during the afternoon.
And there's also a massive cultural phenomenon in August that travelers really need to understand, right? Ferragosto.
Yes. August 15th is the Feast of the Assumption, but historically it dates back to the Emperor Augustus in 18 BC.
Wow, okay.
The Feriae Augusti, a period of rest after the intense agricultural labor of the summer.
A 2,000-year-old holiday.
And the tradition still holds. For generations, entire Roman families have literally boarded up their shops and apartments in August and fled the city for the coast or the mountains.
So you have this bizarre dynamic in August where the actual locals abandon the city because it's too hot, leaving behind a husk of a city completely overrun by millions of sweltering tourists.
It's wild.
Many of the best family-run restaurants, like the ones we talked about in Staccio, simply close for the month.
They do. It is the absolute worst time to experience the authentic fabric of the city.
So the dossier gives us the sweet spots, the spring and the autumn. Specifically April and May and September and October.
Perfect times to go.
The light in late afternoon autumn is famous. That golden Roman light. The temperatures are mild, you can eat comfortably outside. But what really caught my eye in this travel design was the hidden gem, the absolute sleeper hit of the Roman calendar.
January and February.
Yes. The dossier calls winter highly underrated. And I look at this almost like a financial strategy. You want to buy the dip.
That's a great way to look at it.
When the entire global tourism industry is zigging toward a July vacation, you zag.
It is a brilliant arbitrage of travel resources. Let's really break down the immense value of those winter months.
Let's do it.
First, from a purely economic standpoint, you hit the quietest, least expensive months of the year. The prices for flights, hotels, and even some tour guides drop significantly because demand falls off a cliff after the holidays.
But the real return on investment isn't just financial, it's experiential.
Definitely. Think about the Vatican lines we discussed earlier. In January, the crushing crowds just evaporate. Yeah, you can actually stand in the Sistine Chapel, find a spot on a bench, and look up at Michelangelo's Last Judgment in relative silence.
That sounds amazing.
You can stand in front of a Caravaggio painting in the Borghese Gallery and actually examine the brushstrokes without being constantly jostled by a tour group.
But what about the weather? Because I know people are thinking, well, I don't want to go to Italy to freeze.
It is entirely relative. Rome is a Mediterranean city. Yes, it rains more in the winter and the days are shorter, but the temperatures are remarkably mild compared to Northern Europe or North America.
What are we talking about, temperature-wise?
The average high in January is usually around 12 degrees Celsius.
So like mid-50s Fahrenheit, which is perfectly comfortable if you're moving.
It is ideal walking weather. You put on a nice wool coat, a scarf, and you can walk 10 miles across the city from the Colosseum to the Vatican and down to Testaccio without breaking a sweat.
Let me theorize for a second here. Why do we, culturally, default to summer vacations for European travel? Is it purely the school calendar, or is there a psychological obsession with summer in Italy driven by movies and marketing?
Honestly, it's a combination of the industrial era school calendar and a highly romanticized mid-century vision of travel. But we are taking a modern, high-volume vacation schedule and imposing it on a city whose fundamental urban design actively resists it.
What do you mean by that? Actively resistant?
Well, look at the architecture of the Centro Storico. The streets are incredibly narrow. The buildings are tall. This wasn't an accident.
It was planned.
Yes. The ancient Roman architect Vitruvius wrote about designing city streets specifically to block the harsh summer sun and create continuous shade.
Oh, wow.
The city was built to harbor residents from the heat, to encourage afternoon siestas behind thick stone walls. It was physically not built to have hundreds of thousands of extra people standing in the direct sun in huge piazzas in July.
That makes total sense. So by going in the winter, you are actually aligning your physical experience with the city's built environment.
Right.
You're working with Rome instead of fighting it.
Exactly. It changes the entire physical and financial reality of the trip. Buy the dip. Go in February. Eat a steaming bowl of Coda alla Vaccinara when it's crisp outside.
All right, let's move to our fifth and final structural pillar. Let's say you have conquered Rome. You got the Borghese tickets, you found the hidden trattoria in Testaccio, you had your moonlit walk by the Trevi Fountain, you hacked the calendar and went in February. Is the trip over?
Far from it.
Because the dossier makes a very compelling strategic argument that Rome should never be viewed as an isolated, standalone destination. It is the ultimate launchpad.
This is where we get into the macrogeography of Italy. Rome is positioned perfectly in the center of the peninsula, but more importantly, it is the absolute nexus of the Frecciarossa high-speed train network.
The Frecciarossa, the Red Arrow. The engineering behind this network completely changed the economic and tourist geography of Italy, didn't it?
It really did. It is one of the premier high-speed rail networks in Europe. The ETR 1000 trains can reach commercial speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
And they run on dedicated high-speed tracks entirely separate from the slower regional commuter lines.
And the travel times from Roma Termini station are just staggeringly fast. The dossier breaks it down. You can get to Naples in 1 hour and 10 minutes.
You can be in Florence in 1 hour and 20 minutes.
And you can reach Venice in 3 hours and 30 minutes.
And that speed requires a massive paradigm shift for travelers, particularly those coming from countries without robust rail infrastructure. When people plan multi-city trips, they instinctively think in terms of flights.
But flying from Rome to Florence makes absolutely zero sense.
Think about the friction of modern air travel. To fly from Rome to Florence, you have to pack your bags, take a 40-minute, €50 taxi ride out to Fiumicino Airport.
Ugh, the airport.
You have to arrive 2 hours early to navigate security and check bags. You wait at the gate, you board, you fly for 45 minutes, you deplane, wait for luggage, and take another 30-minute taxi from the Florence airport into the city center.
You've literally just burned an entire day of your vacation on pure logistics.
Exactly. But with the Frecciarossa, you walk from your hotel to Termini station right in the center of Rome. You grab an espresso. You board a beautiful air-conditioned train 10 minutes before departure.
Sounds so much better.
It is. You sit in a comfortable seat with massive windows. You watch the hills of Tuscany blur past at 300 kilometers an hour, and 80 minutes later, you step off the train at Santa Maria Novella station, literally steps away from the Duomo in the absolute center of Florence.
It effectively shrinks the country. You can treat Italy not as a series of separate flights, but almost like a massive city connected by subway stops.
High-speed rail is a strategic tool that allows you to build an itinerary of incredible contrast without the exhaustion of travel.
Let's talk about those contrasts. The dossier positions Florence as the perfect counterpoint to Rome. If you take that 80-minute train ride north, how does the experience shift?
The shift is jarring, but in the best possible way. Rome, as we've established, is sprawling antiquity. It is layers of empire, republic, and Baroque all mashed together over a massive geographic area.
Right.
It represents the centralization of imperial and papal power.
And Florence.
Florence is compact, it is intimately walkable, and instead of 1,000 years of layered history, Florence is hyper-focused on one specific, explosive period of human achievement. The Renaissance.
The shift from the power of the empire to the power of humanism.
Precisely. Going from the Colosseum in Rome to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence provides this incredible chronological journey.
I love that.
In Rome, you see the architectural dominance of the ancient world. A quick train ride later, you see the rebirth of art, science, and perspective funded by the Medici family. You see Michelangelo's David, the ultimate celebration of human form and potential.
It's a philosophical contrast as much as an architectural one. What about going south? Taking that 70-minute train down to Naples.
Going south takes the ancient thread of Rome and extends it in a radically different direction, because the dossier heavily recommends using Naples as the jumping-off point to experience Pompeii.
The city frozen in time by Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD.
This is the ultimate archaeological contrast to Rome. When you are standing in the Roman Forum, you are looking at ruins that have been continuously inhabited, repurposed, looted, and weathered by 2,000 years of human activity.
Right. The history is alive, but it's heavily scarred.
Exactly. But Pompeii is a true time capsule.
Because of the specific volcanology of the eruption, right?
Yeah. Pompeii wasn't destroyed by lava. It was buried incredibly quickly by a pyroclastic surge. A superheated avalanche of gas, ash, and pumice.
Terrifying.
It instantly suffocated the city and sealed it under meters of volcanic material, completely protecting it from oxygen and moisture.
So when you step off the train and walk into Pompeii, you aren't seeing layers of history. You are seeing a single day in the 1st century AD preserved in terrifying detail.
Yes, you see the exact layout of a wealthy Roman villa. You see the vibrant frescoes on the walls. You see the ruts in the cobblestone streets worn down by chariot wheels.
Like walking onto a movie set.
You even see the original ovens and the bakeries and the countertops of the Thermopolia, which were essentially ancient fast food restaurants.
The contrast between the bustling, continually evolving ruins of Rome and the silent, ash-preserved streets of Pompeii provides unparalleled context for how everyday Romans actually lived.
And just like the Roman Forum, the dossier strongly advises hiring a specialized guide for Pompeii. It is a massive, sprawling site, and without context, it can become exhausting.
So the overarching strategy here is that the high-speed rail turns transit into part of the vacation. It removes the stress and replaces it with seamless movement between these massive historical focal points.
It is the ultimate argument for extending your stay and embracing the rhythm of the European continent.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, navigating through the layers of this incredible city based on the architecture of Yvon Jr. Blanchet's dossier. Let's cleanly synthesize the 5 strategic shifts we've discussed.
First, the booking reality check. You must lock down advance tickets for the mandatory foundation, the Colosseum complex, the Vatican museums, the Pantheon, and the Borghese Gallery.
All right. Do not arrive hoping for the best, or you will be locked out of history.
Second, the geography of authenticity. Escape the historic center when you are hungry. Avoid the photo menus.
Head to the former slaughterhouse district of Testaccio for the real, working-class Roman kitchen. Embrace the cacio e pepe and the oxtail stew.
Third, the temporal shift. Revisit the monumental architecture, the Trevi Fountain, the Pantheon, Campo dei Fiori at night.
Let the crowds vanish so you can actually hear the water of the ancient aqueducts and feel the scale of the spaces.
Fourth, hack the calendar. Avoid the brutal heat and crushing crowds of July and August.
Be strategic and buy the winter dip in January or February to experience a quieter, more authentic city.
And fifth, utilize Rome as a high-speed hub. Leverage the Frecciarossa train network to seamlessly connect Rome's sprawling antiquity with the Renaissance intimacy of Florence and the perfectly preserved time capsule of Pompeii.
Treating a city with this level of strategic respect is transformative. It changes your entire posture. When you stop treating a city like a superficial checklist of monuments to be consumed, you stop being a tourist fighting for space, and you start becoming a traveler engaging with the living fabric of the place.
And that idea of engaging with the living fabric brings up a final fascinating question.
Oh, what's that?
We started this deep dive by talking about the physical layers of Rome, the fact that the city is a literal geological core sample of human history. the ancient rubble beneath the Renaissance foundations, beneath the modern pavement.
Right. Every generation built their present directly on top of the past.
Exactly. But it makes you wonder about the modern era, the tens of millions of travelers who pass through the city every year. What is the layer that our generation is leaving behind right now?
Wow. That is an incredible thought.
When historians and archaeologists look back at the Roman strata 1,000 years from today, when they dig down to the layer of the 21st century, what will they find?
That's a great question.
Will they see us merely as a generation of passive spectators, as people who just walked through, complained about the heat, took a digital photo that disappeared into a server, and left without contributing to the culture?
Or will they find evidence that we were active participants?
Exactly. How do we travel in a way that actually honors the layers beneath us? Do we invest our time in understanding the local culinary traditions? Do we respect the pace of the city? Do we engage with the history deeply enough that our presence actually sustains the culture rather than eroding it?
Are we just consuming the museum, or are we actively maintaining the exhibit?
That is a heavy, beautiful question to leave on. A reminder that our presence in these historic spaces is part of their ongoing story. Well, that is all the time we have for our exploration of Rome today. Keep thinking about those layers beneath your feet, keep hacking those travel calendars, and most importantly, stay curious until our next deep dive.
You've been listening to Beyond the Horizon, the podcast by Area Voyages. The full article for this episode is available at www.areavoyages.com. Remember to like, share the podcast, and leave a review to help promote our work. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Until next time, safe travels.